I'm trying. There we go.
All right, very good. So our guest today is Anitra Gallegos. She is the dynamic principal of Panorama Middle School in Colorado Springs. And many of us on this podcast got to be with Anitra when she did a podcast episode earlier. You're going to hear that she is tenacious about putting her kids and her teachers first. And as she says, when you do that, good results follow. And she's got the data to prove it. So, Anitra, welcome. We're very eager to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Welcome to all of the participants. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you have decided to invest some time and some space to really discuss, and let's talk about some ways that we can make an impact for those who are most impacted. Creating conditions for healing in a school is more necessary now than ever before. And pardon me. And part of my passion behind this is rooted in wanting to really make a difference for kids at the core. And so today we are gonna just jump right in, and we're going to start exploring how to create conditions for the learning community to heal and to thrive. So first, we're going to do an overview of some key aspects of living and operating in your personal and authentic leadership. And I'm going to discuss a few ways and reasons why engaging in this work requires this type of leadership approach. Second, we will discuss how personal and authentic leadership drives the foundation and creates the pillars for your leadership and the platform for which everything that you do stands on. And then finally, we are going to discuss some true, real, and tangible ways that we can begin this work for staffs and students. So let's get down with the get down. All right. So I decided to start with personal and authentic leadership because this is such an incredibly important aspect of creating conditions for healing, thriving, and learning. So when you have this leadership style and you can really be true to who you are as a human being, your vision, and what you bring as an individual person, you are able to connect to those staff, students, community members that you serve. And another reason why drawing on personal and authentic leadership is so critical is because we all know that this work is so difficult. I mean, it's hard. It's a grind on the daily. And so when you operate from this leadership style, you are able to draw on something deeper and more personal. And that, I find, that is what really gets me through the hard days, the hard conversations, the hard decisions. And so that's why this is so incredibly important. So I brought up 5 key things that I either thought about or really delved deep into to develop this type of leadership style, because I was always a solid leader. I mean, I had a good head on my shoulder, but I often early on in my leadership wasn't as successful as I thought I could be. And after years of analyzing my own practices, I realized it's because I was leading in a way that I thought others wanted me to show up. And I was putting other foci at the forefront instead of the things that were most important to me. And when I really began to recognize that I need to show up as Anitra, I need to show up in all my human ways, I was able to lead in a way that started yielding results. So the first thing that I did was having a moral imperative to make a change. Now, all the biggies, if you read at all in education, you are going to see that you have a lot of authors and prolific speakers talking about the why. You have to be connected to your why. Well, I do believe that that is a critical piece, but being a person, having personal and authentic leadership, I feel like it needs to go a little bit deeper. There has to be a moral imperative. I mean, something that resonates in your heart, something that will keep you connected to the work. And so one, and they can come from a myriad of places. And, I'll give you an example of a moral imperative that was imparted on me very young. And so my mother's family is from New Mexico, and my grandfather, her dad, was never got past the 7th grade education. Now, this is because when he was in 7th grade in New Mexico in the 1930s, he was not allowed to speak his native language, which was Spanish. So I'm going to pare down the story as much as I can. But long story short was that my grandfather and another boy were outside, and one of the teachers had overheard some Spanish being spoken. He turned around to see a white student and then to see my grandfather. Automatically, he assumed that the Spanish had come from my grandfather. And he told my grandfather that he needed to go into the principal. The principal then told my grandfather, who denied that it was him, that he didn't say anything. He said that he was going to take him in front of the entire student body and publicly flog him for lying and for speaking Spanish. And my grandfather decided on that day that was his last day of education. And as a young girl, that moral imperative began with me needing to get an education. He told me, you need to get an education. I don't want you to suffer the way I did. I don't want you to go through the hardships. But as I have developed as an educator, I graduated, got the degrees, and then I became an educator. And on the day that I got my principalship, I felt as though that moral imperative had created a reckoning. Like at that point, I did something for my grandfather, who had long passed away before I got my principalship. And I felt like I did something great that day, because in this seat, I will never humiliate a child like that. I will never block access like that. I will be inclusive. My grandfather's struggle came at a price, and we balanced the scales that day. And I've been balancing the scales on that ever since. And so that's the importance of a moral imperative. Now, y'all don't have to be that deep. Like, you don't have to go that deep, but it does have to pull at your heartstrings. And so having that moral imperative then drove me to begin to think about doing what's right over doing what's easy. And I'm going to tell you, in the world of education, that equates to putting kids first, bottom line, period, point blank, I don't care. Doing what's right is putting kids first, and it's not always easy. I'm going to tell you some of the ways that you have to delve deep into this leadership is, doing what's right over doing what's easy means budget and personnel cuts, hard conversations on those. If people aren't yielding results, they're sitting in intervention spots and your data is not moving. Hey man, we gotta do something with this. I would rather use my money on resources, curriculum, and training for teachers rather than on an FTE that's not yielding results. And that's hard, but I'm putting, because but that affects my kids. Having an adult that's not yielding results year after year is not what helps my kids. I have cell mandates every day, every class. My teachers are required to do a social emotional check-in with all of their students. It is a part of their lesson plan. And a lot of teachers are like, I'm not comfortable with that. Okay, so then I provide them with training so that they get comfortable. Because this is the work that has to be done. And we have to know and understand that if we don't do what's right, we're going to continue to get wrong results. And so, infusing data practices. I make my teachers look at data all the time, and they get frustrated. They're like, why do we have to spend so much time on this? Because if you don't know what's going on, how are you going to affect change? You have to know. This is no longer a guessing game, because these are kids' futures. These are actual people. They're human beings that have a future ahead of them. And we have a moral responsibility to help craft that so that they have a chance. And then, so data practices, making sure you know how to spend your time. Those are hard things sometimes, but having personal and authentic leadership makes you more comfortable making those decisions. And then my next one is one of my favorites, because it allows me to be me. But it's showing up as you every day in a very human way. This means that I have to be an understanding person. I know as a leader that I don't know everything about a situation, I don't know everything about a topic, and I don't know everything about a person. So knowing that allows me to operate with space, grace, and empathy. And it allows me to communicate honestly too. When you are a leader that can communicate honestly and come in and say, hey, team, my kids are a mess. I feel like crud and I didn't sleep well. I'm struggling today. Being able to do that and modeling that for your staff and your students. I have kids come to me all the time like, Miss Gallegos, are you tired? I'm like, heck yes, I'm tired. Y'all, do you know how many incidents reports I had to write yesterday? Yes, I'm tired. Thank you for asking. They're like, you want a donut? Yes, I want a donut. Give me two. I need the sugar. All right. But I'm modeling. You have to be honest. I'm modeling. It's okay to communicate how you feel, where you're at, because nobody's I haven't met a mind reader yet, and I haven't met a mind reader who's gotten my mind right. And nobody you really does. So instead of requiring people to have telepathy, let's just create a space where it's okay to be human. Because you're going to get more results when you address the human and not the product or the employee or the student. You see the child. So that's showing up every day in a very human way and making sure you communicate it. The next thing, the next one, keeping the bar high on expectations and equating that with support. Ladies and gentlemen and friends, I want you to know that it is never okay to lower the bar on anyone. And I mean anyone. We never lower the bar. When you lower a bar for a child, they will never reach their potential because they have not been stretched. You don't know how far they can go because you're not doing what's required. When you lower the bar and your expectations on your teachers, you are allowing your students to suffer. Now, having high expectations so I have really high expectations, really high. And I also have an equitable amount of support for every expectation that I bring forth. Cell, you have to do a cell mandate, a cell check-in with your kids, mindful minutes, all of that stuff. I'm going to train you as to the importance of that. Okay, that's my support. I require all my teachers to have SPED-focused scaffolds and English language learning scaffolds in every lesson plan. Why? Because those are the students that they serve. And how do I support that? I've brought in coaches. We do observations. We do coaching cycles. I don't want anyone to say, I just say, go do it, and don't give them the vision behind it, the purpose, and it lights a fire. It does. And then finally, sorry, I'm getting going. Ooh, all right. Finally, speaking your truth, even if your voice quivers, is an absolute critical component of developing your personal and authentic leadership. Bottom line is you have to speak the truth. You have to. For some leaders, that is speaking the truth while your voice is quivering. For other leaders like me, it's learning that you ain't got to be all rah and toning the message down, because the message is more important than the messenger. I used to want the message to be heard and felt the same way I feel it and I experience it. But what I didn't realize and recognize was that people don't have the same experience as me. So it's not going to light that fire for them. So I have to speak truth, life, wisdom, into people in a way that they'll hear it. But no matter what, you cannot be chewing on your tongue. You cannot, you have to be able to say things in a way that makes sense. Okay. So these 5 things, amongst many others, but these 5 things really did help me embody and actuate my potential. And so let's move on to this next one. All right. So once you've become comfortable, moderately comfortable, less scared to live in this leadership style, because it's scary. It is scary. And it does have a cost to it sometimes, most of the time. But but once you have begun to lead with that moral imperative, and you've made a vow to do what is right, and you approach things in a human and honest way, you're going to start to see a couple of things tease out in your leadership. Now, these are what I call my pillars. So as I've been talking through what, how I developed that, these are some of the things that came out of it. And these characteristics or traits are the backbone of everything that I do. My decisions, how I move, they are at the center. They hold every decision up that I make. So the first one is integrity. So I'm sure you've kind of gleaned this from the last slide, but I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And I communicate that though with compassion, care, and absolute certainty. Again, it's not just about what you say, it's following it up with action. People know my moral imperative because they see it in my actions. They know that they're going to get honesty from me, but they also know that I'm safe. I'm super safe and I'm super supportive. And I'll have space for them when they're struggling. I mean, I've had teachers that I've had to have some real hard conversations with, but I had to do what was right for the kids. And it's even more important to have integrity when those hard decisions come up. You have to always know that your decisions as a leader or as a teacher, they have longstanding impact on those that you serve. And you absolutely do serve as a leader and as a teacher. It is a service-oriented position. So integrity, I mean, I've had to increase my appetite quite extensively because operating with integrity involves a high level and a high diet in crow, humble pie, and the occasional egg on the face. Like, I'm not even playing. So instruction is my second pillar. Now, we are all educators. We got into education for a reason. And if instruction is not one of your pillars, I don't know how to, I don't know how successful this would, this would be for a school leader. Instruction is and must be the primary focus of any institution of learning. So I've talked a lot about in podcasts and stuff about where your focus goes, energy flows. And so if you focus on your instruction, you recognize that instruction is the thoroughfare to everything. Sports programs. If you don't have solid instruction, you can't have a solid sports program. Why, Anitra? Because if you don't have solid instruction and great instructors, your kids aren't going to learn. Then they're not going to do well on assessments, and then they can't play. Same thing with your music and art programs. Instruction teaches students resilience, grit, endurance. All the things we want kids to know and be able to do has to funnel through your instructional lens. It has to be purposeful, intentional, and it is the heart of every learning environment. And without quality instruction, no real learning can take place. So it's not just knowing this on the first hand. On the second hand, it's knowing the things you have to incorporate into your instruction. First of all, you need to know your clientele. Things have to be culturally responsive. If they don't resonate with your students, good luck on having them try to retain it. They don't want to retain anything that doesn't have to do with them. This is a very egocentric society. If it's not about me and it doesn't connect to me, I don't want to know about it. And so, you also have to make sure that your instruction is trauma informed. How do kids grapple with tough tasks, academic tasks, and how does that bleed out into their behavior? And understanding having the correct instructional strategies can mitigate many of those problems. It's understanding this and making sure that as a leader or as a teacher, you make these decisions that lead to learning. My whole thing is I want kids to read, write, and do math so that they can go out and get a house, get a job, and I need to make sure that my retirement isn't gone to the wind. That's right. Yes, I see some raising the roof on that. Yes, yes. The only way we're going to do that is by producing educated people. That's it. So fun. And then my last pillar is dramatic pause for a drink. My last pillar is inspiration. I require myself to continually be inspired. If I can't seek inspiration, some people say I'm the inspiration. Yay, good for me. That's not the inspiration I'm talking about. I'm talking about me as a leader being inspired by the human story, by the human experience, and that affecting the fact how I lead, why I lead, and where I lead. So I have a very interesting student and her and the family that has led me to have my latest inspiration. Now, this father has fought for his students for over 3 years because they were in a horrible, abusive situation with the mom. The student that came to me has so many challenges. Like, there are so many cognitive challenges, behavioral challenges, emotional challenges. And this student has been super hard to service. And this dad fought for 3 years for this student. 3 years. And that was the easy part, because dealing with the behaviors, the challenges is so difficult. And I figure if this dad can fight for 3 years to get this student, oh, I can definitely make sure that this student has a caring environment and an environment that has space and understanding for the challenges that student brings. Like, that's an inspiration to me. I went hard for this kiddo. And it's those things. That's why, I pushed on some, I pushed on some SPED meetings. I went hard. If that dad can do that, man, I better show up too. And so all of these things, the integrity, the instruction, the inspiration, they all help me do my work. And when I show up as me, I'm not apologetic about who I am. I used to be afraid of who I was. I'm not afraid anymore, because I know who I am and why I do what I do. And if people and anybody who spends any kind of time with me will see that. And that's that personal and authentic leadership. It helps me set my foundation, my integrity, the need for instruction, and the deep root and the inspiration. So let's pause briefly. I'm going to turn this over to you, Jeff. So, because I can't see anything in the chat. Somebody's going to have to let me know how this is going. Do you have any questions, comments, valid concerns?
Well, Anitra, I can jump in with something that really resonated with me when you were talking about instruction. The researcher, he's an educational researcher. He's not an educator per se, but he's an educational researcher. John Hattie has done a tremendous amount of research on what moves the dial in the classroom.
The effect size. Mm-hmm.
What's the effect size? And he said, just about anything that you do with good intention will move the dial. But the thing that will move the dial the most, that has the biggest effect size, is when teachers reflect on their instruction and say, why did this work Why didn't this work? So to your point about instruction, if I just go about my daily business, I do the lesson plan, but I'm not reflecting on, did my kids get it or not get it? We're missing a crucial element of what can really benefit the kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to be, I mean, it's almost like a science. I mean, the idea of entering an instructional environment or an instructional expectation with flippancy ain't going to get it done.
Yeah.
It's just not going to get it done. And
Any
am I
other,
ready to
any
move
comments
on, or
or
does anybody want
questions?
to?
There was so much. Well, first of all, I have so many notes. This has been amazing. And the chat was on fire. Like, we have so many great comments, but I really wanted you to speak to, if we have time, if you could speak to two comments. Elizabeth writes, I believe most teachers want to meet expectations, but often do not have the tools or skills to keep up. Providing those is a must. Even veteran teachers need to be supported because things change daily, which leads me to my question for you. And I know we talked offline before this webinar, and you were talking about how sometimes we can use lack of resources as an excuse. But how do you, as an administrator, make sure you support your teachers when you don't have the tools? Or how can someone who might be listening say, I don't have the tools I need, what can I do? And not necessarily use that as a crutch.
So that's a really good question. So again, and I'm going to go back to one of those pieces that I spoke about is I am a leader that does not put an expectation out there without an actualized and true plan on how I'm going to support it. So one of the things, like I said, some of the teachers were very uncomfortable with doing the cell mandate. You know, they were wildly uncomfortable with that. They were like, what do I do if a kid if I give them a fist to 5 and they give me a 0? I'm like, well, here are the systems in place. And so we had to do a training on that. And so making sure that, a question teachers can ask their leaders when they're given directives like this, or their things, and it's not challenging, and a great leader will not find a challenge in this. So I love that. I'm like the comment said, I want to do my best. I don't believe any teacher wakes up and says, I just want to screw this off today. Like, I don't believe that doesn't happen. They get so upset when things don't go right. They are so upset. And so I encourage teachers and other leaders, if somebody puts something out there, awesome. How are we going to support that and create a system so that's sustainable?
That's good. That's really good.
You have to ask. I mean, instead of being like, you don't, and again, speaking your truth. Hey, I've noticed that you've given us a couple of directives. I don't feel comfortable with this. Can I get some support, or, is there a plan to train the staff in this? Because I know we all want to do this.
That's good. That's good.
You have, speaking the truth. I'm going to keep going back. It's a loop. That's how I lead. That's how you, and that's just, be unafraid. Ask the question. The question deserves to be asked. As educators, you shouldn't go into any initiative like, I don't understand. I don't know why. We as leaders, we have a job. It is our job to make sure that the people we lead and serve and the systems we create make sense and work. Like, it's just, I mean, I don't know. That's just me.
No, I think that's great. And I think you answered the second question, which is basically, you talked about often putting how other people want you to lead versus how you lead. And I think that becomes an issue with newer teachers, which I think Elizabeth commented on as well, right. We want to teach how we think we should teach versus finding our authentic self. But you answered it when you said, give giving the space, the grace, and the empathy. So as leaders, in order to create these spaces where the healing can happen, where I can speak my voice, even if it's shaking, where it is safe, I think leaders make it a point to say, I'm giving you the space, the grace, and the empathy to say, I don't understand this initiative. Because I will say this, if we're in a staff meeting and you roll out this initiative and everybody's doing this, and I'm in my seat like, I don't know what the hell you talking about, it might be scared for me to say, I don't understand this. So it's what you said is so key for leadership, because often young teachers don't know what they don't know, and older teachers only know what they want to know, and they don't care to know anything new because we don't have the space to speak. And I think what you said was so good.
I feel like our veteran teachers are often I mean, there's an assumption that they know how to do it all and they've been around. So, you know, even with instructional feedback loops, oh, she's been tenured for 5 years. I'll just do my obligatory, formals, and that's it. That isn't right. That's not cool. No. No. I feel as though veteran teachers should be some of the first ones we say, hey, we need some early adopters, because they know how to, veteran teachers know how to get an initiative and do the thing with it. But you want to get them as early adopters, and then you explain all of this, and their experience alone is such a powerhouse of ideas. Powerhouse. And the young teachers, they just want to do right. And I love that they have their innocent little teacher hearts. I do. And it makes me sad when they get so downtrodden because there's so much being asked of them. I get it, guys. I get it. And I'm here to support you. So are we good to
Anitra, one more quick question, if I may, just very quickly, and then don't want to hold up at all. But you've been doing this now for several years, and all of the conversations that you've been talking about in terms of within the school that you've been working at, right? And as a leader, you've embodied a lot of this. We know that there are ripple effects in terms of, you mentioned something along the lines of parallel process. I think that you use different words, but how you influence the leaders and teachers in your school who then influence others, and that cascades throughout. And I feel like a lot of time when we talk about this deep transformational culture change, there can be frustration that it doesn't happen quickly. And so just speaking to the ways in which it cascades and builds over time, now that you're several years in and you got through COVID, there was, I know, a building problem, and like you've been able to manage this cultural shift through obstacles because of the commitment that you bring to it.
It is. So anybody in the audience, please don't think that this is a quick process. I am literally rolling a 50-ton boulder up a grade like this. It is slow. It takes a lot of time, effort, thinking, reflection, feedback, data gathering, all of those things. And we're gonna talk about that, because it is a slow process. But again, you have to have that moral imperative, that personal, authentic leadership that draws you back on it. It is so deep that you have to keep going. You have to keep going. And so that's where I come from. Like, that's it, but it is slow. Oh my gosh. This has taught me patience. Nothing but patience. All right. So that was actually a great segue into what we're going to be talking about, because now that we have our philosophical swords on fire and we're ready to make change and do the thing. How and where do we actually do that? Like, so Anitra, I'm all pumped up and I'm excited, but where do I actually start and what can I do to make this into an actual living thing in my building? All right, there's a lot of things a leader must do. But I have 3 things here on this slide. 2 of them are these are things you just have to do. You just have to do it if you are going to create these conditions for students and teachers to thrive and heal and do all of that. And then one of them is just like, if you're not able to influence or you're not in a position where you can do either one of these, you start at the last bullet. So we'll go through those real quick. And then we'll be done. So how and where we start, one of the first things you have to do, and I just talked about this, was invest in your teachers and provide the training that upholds the expectation for the humanistic experience. The next 3 slides I'm going to show you are going to be trainings that I have either I've either facilitated my staff myself, or I've paid somebody to come do, because it upholds the expectation of how I want them to approach teaching, learning, students, and just being a person. Okay. The second one, so that's a must. That is one of those musts. You have to be able to do this as a leader. The second thing is, you have to monitor data. And you have to create a culture of feedback for staff and students. And we'll talk a little bit about how I do that and where data lives in my building, and it lives everywhere. Everywhere. All right. And then I actually don't have any slides for this last bullet, so I'm just going to kind of hit this one right now. If you don't have the ability, capacity, influence to do one of the top 2, you just need to simply ask yourself what you want staff and students to remember you for, and then build an action plan around that. So what I mean by this one particularly is there's a lot of principles, I'm sorry, that I've known and seen that are the hall duty dudes. They're just in the halls drinking their coffee. That's when you see them. You see them at hall duty and lunch duty, maybe dismissal duty. Every once in a while, they'll pop into a class. Do you want to be remembered as the principal, as the duty dude? Is that how you want to be remembered? If so, continue to operate like that. But if you want to be a leader that makes a difference and that is known to make a difference, do something. If you have identified your moral imperative, what actions are you creating? What are you doing to make sure that that is known, that people know that is, your moral imperative? Ooh, well, that was weird. Glad that stopped. But yeah, is your moral imperative known? Do people know what you stand for? And how do they know that? It's by how you talk. It's how you act. It's how you treat kids. It's how you treat parents. If you can't do the providing high quality professional development to back up your vision, and you can't create a culture, or your staff and students or people might not be ready to really dive deep into the data because there's not an understanding around it, make sure they know what you're about. Start there. Make sure people know who you are and what you're about and what you stand for. So I'm going to go into the next slides about how I've invested. So there's not content really on these next slides. They're more images that some really powerful images of some of the professional development that I have provided for my staff so that they can do the things that I need them to do. So this first training, I did an ACEs, so Adverse Childhood Experiences and Behavior Communication. So everybody that's in here, I highly encourage that staffs across the country understand ACEs, how they affect physical health, mental health, and learning, and how trauma truly affects a student's ability to access, attend to, and retain information. Like, if there are principals out here or leaders or people that do PDs, you have to find a high quality professional development about ACEs. This one specifically was, I talked about how ACEs are a communication of behavior, and how when students have these types of experiences and this type of trauma, how it plays out in the way that they react to social stimuli, academic, how it affects their overall health and their longevity. Like, this is, I mean, we talk about brain research, we talk about, you know, them being in reptilian brain, and those are things that are caused by trauma. And so this particular PD is one that I give annually, because I always have new staff. Two, it is always a good reminder, and it helps us see behavior as behavior and behavior not as people, because we all exhibit behaviors, and many times we don't want to be judged on our worst moment when we are in trauma in our brain. And the thing is that I let my staff know, I'm like, you really have to recognize that their brains are like, nope, I'm done. I am done. And what do you do with that when they're in your class or in your face or in your office? You have to know, okay, teacher, I just asked this kid to put his name on his paper, and he told me to shut the F up. I'm a dumb B. Okay. That probably has nothing to do with you. Nada. Nothing. It's like, geez, bro. I mean, recognizing the large reactions to very small stimuli. Bing, 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 bing. This kid's hurting. I don't need to get in his face right now. I don't need to do that. That's a trigger. Understanding these things. So that was one of my first trainings that I absolutely brought to my staff, and I bring to my staff annually. This next training I did not conduct. I actually had another group come in and talk more specifically about, not just about ACEs and behavior, but like true trauma response, and really letting the teachers know that trauma doesn't always have to be big. Sometimes I think when we think about a student with significant trauma, we think about this kid that's like wilding out. It's not always the case. And so understanding that there is a continuum of responses, and these types of and that, you know, understanding that different types of trauma meshed with different types of personality, it creates a different blend of behavior. If I have these types of trauma and I'm this type of person, this is how it might look. You might have two kids with the same trauma, but two totally different personality types, and they're going to show it differently. I had a young lady tell me, going through some stuff. She told me, Miss, my soul is tired. 13. My soul is tired. She cried. She just felt so bad. I have another student, same stuff. Actually, they were related. Same stuff. Man, this other one, you better watch out. You don't look at her wrong. She'll knock you out. The other one exploded. The other one imploded. Training my teachers to recognize these things so that they don't walk into a buzzsaw. I train my teachers so that, one, they don't take this to heart. Don't take this personally. I mean, take it personally that, man, I personally am so sad that this kid has this going on. But don't take it on yourself like, I can't believe that kid did that to me. They didn't do it to you. They did it to themselves. They did it to their situation. And understanding how withdraw and connection and action and inaction. If you look at this diagram, understanding how we move closer to the center was super important for my teachers. Now, I've only done this training twice in my 4 years. I don't have the people who used to do it. They moved on and are off in the world, making trauma response a known thing. But this is incredibly important. This also helps teachers recognize that a lot of behaviors are super subconscious for kids. Super subconscious. All they see is an adult in front of them. That's not jiving. And you don't, and again, going back to that showing up in a human way and not knowing everything about everybody in every situation, you better know you telling that kid, really, you could have tried harder. You have no idea if that kid gets any life spoken into him. You can't say stuff like that. It's being mindful. Because guess what? These kids in trauma, I'm going to tell you, in this day and age, they're going to tell you off. They'll tell you where to stick it. And I work with middle schoolers in a highly impact. But guess what? They don't tell me to stick it. They don't. They never do. Because they know I care and they know I see them for who they are, not what they're doing. Because I was a kid. I was a trauma kid. Another moral imperative. Aces upon aces upon aces. Statistical anomaly. And I'm morally driven to make sure that I have space for kids like me. Because not all of them are gonna make it. And I know that too. And that hurts knowing that. But I, as the educator and as the leader, it is my job to make sure every adult that those kids come in contact with have at least been exposed to this, and they don't have an excuse. They don't have an excuse to move like that because they know. And it's my job to make sure that they know that that's how this goes. We respond to a human. This is a person. They're 10, 11, and 12. Their mouths might be funky. Their attitudes might act like they're 40, but they're not. They are little babies, itty bitties. It's funny when they get their little peach fuzz. They're all excited about their little mustaches in 8th grade. I'm like, boy, you got about 2 more years of shaving that bad boy before it comes in it decently, but I got you. You're a big boy now. Okay? So trauma response, again, sorry, I didn't mean to derail, but yes, That was a huge one for my teachers. Again, I have this expectation that they move a certain way. I equated it with why do I want you to move that way? And then this was one of my favorites to present. And I encourage leaders to present PD that really does. I always go back to scales balancing. That goes back to balancing the scales for teachers and students. So this particular PD, anger as communication, I actually use this as a way of humanizing my students to my staff. Because we all know that when we see kids out in the wild, like they freak out because we're not human. Like we don't go to restaurants, we don't go to grocery stores. Like they're like, oh my gosh, you're here, you're at the gas station. Yes, I drive. Like I need gas, so we see that with students a lot with their teachers. But there is often, I've noticed that teachers sometimes don't humanize their kids. And so when I present anger as communication, again, we talk about behavior communication, emotional communication. Communication is key in all of these things. So I present this, and when I present this particular PD, we start with the circle, okay? And we talk about different educational scenarios and instances that drive us to have fear, to be frustrated or confused. And we do it we start very much from a teacher-centered education. Like, why do teachers get so pissed off all the time? Why are they cranky? Why are they mad? Like, we talk about that. Like, what are some of these things that create that? And then after we discuss this and we talk about how, it's okay for you to be angry, but what do you do with it? How does that come out? Does that come out in action? Does it come out in gossip? Does it come out productively, non-productively? So we dive into those types of things. But then before I transition, this is where the balance comes in. I ask a couple of people, I'm like, I ask teachers, do you see your name in there? And they're like, what? I'm like, do you see your name anywhere in here? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, why not? And they're like, because these are all emotions. I'm a person. Exactly. And so if your name's not in there and a student is angry, it has nothing to do with you. They are feeling the same exact things you are. We as human beings are all on an equitable plane when it comes to emotion. We've all been given the range of emotion to feel. Just adults have seemingly more tools to navigate that. And when I talk about, these are some of the reasons why your kids in the educational environment are angry. Your name isn't in there. So don't take it on. Don't take it on. And when we start to recognize and we push on our staff to see more than just the profession, like teaching, I teach, you learn, I go home, you go home. We have to learn to read behavior, read emotions, read data, read the room in order to create these conditions for kids and for schools. And so the data thing is that's a segue into my next slide. But before I leave my three trainings, my three training slides, like this, I intentionally spend a lot of time on this, and I want to give a little caveat for anybody who would like to engage in these trainings and like, yes, I want to bring this to my staff. That's awesome. Here's a couple of just word from the wise who've already made this mistake. Okay. So one, any kind of social emotional trauma, heavy emotion type of PD, you cannot do it on like a morning PD or something and then expect your teachers to go teach. You cannot. You have to be cognizant of you're dealing with adults. You're dealing with big humans who might have trauma, who might be feeling these things, who wrestle with this their whole life. And so when you provide these trainings, always provide them at the end of the day, and usually on a day of full training, or give them time to marinate and decompress. You cannot expect a heavy cognitive load from your teachers after you go deep like this. They're not going to be in it. They will not. So be mindful when you present this type of professional development. Okay. So finally, the last one, the big one, the hardest one, that if you're going to create these conditions, you got to do this. Data is probably the toughest hurdle that you have to overcome. And going back to my whole scales analogy, this is probably one of the hardest ones to balance, because you have to decide how much you're going to be pressing on this first bullet, which data tells us calculates student growth and achievement. And we all know that there's legislation all over the country, pay for performance. There's a lot of things out there. And so being able to calculate your students' growth and achievement, and then how do you put efforts into making sure that those things increase while simultaneously caring for the humanistic approach that I've just spent the last however many minutes talking about? Like, that's hard. So first thing, I'm going to just say, these are things that need to happen in a data culture. Okay. This isn't particularly how to get here. It's just things that need to exist within a culture that values data and feedback. Okay, so calculating student growth and achievement. Teachers and leaders, you need to know how to read a student growth report. We all have state assessments. They all get their little handy dandy, parent report. It is important that you know how to read those and you know how to sense make those, not only for your students, but for yourself. You have to know who the kids are that are sitting in front of you and what they are able to do, so that you can scaffold and support appropriately. There goes that instruction. Okay. Also, you have to use data to evaluate teacher effectiveness. And I'm not just talking about grades and student data. One of the most powerful things that I've incorporated into my leadership practice is educational audits. I gather data on the things that I expect. We do trainings on, how to incorporate scaffolds into small groups and all of that stuff. The next, after we do a PD on that, the very next week, I put in my principals update. Guys, this week, your lesson, I'm going to do a lesson plan audit on your scaffolds, your scaffolded supports. And I see, and by doing that, not only do I just see completion, and there's that accountability piece, and it's not a gotcha, because what I really do with this is, if I have a bunch of, I see that all my staff has their scaffolds, but they don't make sense, and it doesn't really support the learning. And I make highlights. I go to their evaluator and I'm like, hey, what are you doing to coach this person up? We did this scaffold supports. It's super weak in their lessons. What are you going to do? How are you going to support them? Or I get my instructional coach. Can you put this person on an instructional round? That's how you use data to evaluate teacher effectiveness. How many times I audit my teachers' contact logs. If you, because we have in our computer system, you can do a digital contact log, and my expectation is that you log every contact that you have with families. Another expectation is that if students have D's or F's, that you have you've made an attempt to call or email, and that needs to be logged. So when I do a gradebook audit and I see somebody that has 4 or 5 kids with F's, I go into the contact log. Have these parents been contacted? Oh, they haven't? No, okay. Easy conversation. Hey, Jeff, saw that, XY, these 3 students are failing. Check the contact log. Did you reach out to mom, dad? What'd they say? What do we need to do? Do we need to put them in some supports? Instead of being like, did you call? Did you do it? No, the reason I want you to call isn't because I want you to check a box that said I call. I want you to have a conversation with this family. Yo, your kid is failing. Is there something going on? They're in the bathroom all the time. They go to the bathroom 6 times a class period. Well, that's a teacher problem, but get what I'm saying? Like I'm seeing, I don't want a phone call for a box check. I want a phone call because I want the parents to know that you care about their kid. Come on now. It's bigger than some of this stuff.
That is
teacher effectiveness.
That is really good, Anitra. I can say more about that, but I won't. But I do want to say there, for those of you that have to drop off because we are a little bit in the OT, there's going to be a core group of us that is going to stay on for another good 10 minutes. But I do want you to advance to the next slide and then come back for those of you that want to hear the last 3 points. But before you jump off, I did want to share with you all about the Compassionate School Leadership Academy. And there's a tiny URL that I want you guys to go to if you are interested in investing in your teachers and providing the training to uphold those expectations, to create this compassionate environment that we're talking about. The Compassionate School Leadership Academy is something you definitely want to check out. Okay, it is a project with Yale University Program for Recovery and Community Health, and as well as the Center for Educational Improvement. So we've partnered together to create this Compassionate School Leadership Academy to do all the things that we've just talked about in our webinar. So if you're like, oh, I really want to do all these things that she's talking about, but I'm not sure how to get started. I'm not sure how to create these conditions to support my children, to support my students, to support my teachers. You really, really, really want to check this out. You really, really want to check this out. So we thank you all for joining us today. If you got to drop off,
sorry, I got
that's okay. That's
excited.
Okay. No, that's okay. If you got to drop off, you can drop off. But Anitra, I am going to give you a chance to wrap up.
Yep,
And say any final thoughts that you would love to. This has been fabulous. I have a ton of notes, and also please let people know how they can continue the conversation with you and really go deeper. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank everybody for listening to me today. I really appreciate the fact that you gave me this space to tell the story of my leadership. If you would like to connect and have questions, or you want to, ask the things that you might not want to ask somebody else. Hey, I'm safe. I'm an objective audience. You can always reach me on LinkedIn. So Anitra Gallegos, there's only one. So you can reach me on LinkedIn. And on my LinkedIn page is also my email address. So you can either message me there or you can message me via email. I am a champion for you, all of you that came in and that are here. Please know that you have another educator who is fighting the same fight that you are, and we are united in this attempt to create systems that will help people be better. And so that's the last. So if you have to leave, go ahead. Toodles, hearts. I am so excited that you came, and thank you so much. For those of you that are going to stick around and listen to me talk for another few minutes, I'll go ahead and finish up my slides. Talked about how I use data to evaluate teacher effectiveness. And then that kind of bleeds into the next bullet, which is you have to have data practices in all of your systems. Like data is so key. We base our lineups on it, you know. Batting average gets you on your first and your lineup. Your stats is what helps you be a starter on a team. You have to see that there is value in the information that we glean from all of the things that we do. All of the things that we do tell a story back to us, and that story is called data. And so the next thing is a data culture will always improve systems based upon feedback and reflection. So we have an instructional framework that we are on year 2 of implementing an instructional framework in my building. And I mean, when I first started my rollout plan, I mean, boy, was it super aggressive. Let's just put it that way. I was like, I'm going to get this done this month and this done this. But as I was gathering my data and I was going back and I was saying, okay, we're training these people. It's not truly translating. I need to go back and do a different training. I need to give them more opportunities to practice this. And then we did another iteration of the rollout. And now we're like on iteration 4 and we're boom, 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 we're jamming. But the only reason we were able to get to that point was because we looked at data, we gave honest feedback to each other, and then we revised our plan based upon what things were, what the data was telling us. And then the final thing is data must evaluate your leadership capabilities and effectiveness. So we all are tried and true with the school data, okay? You know, if you're a principal, you get tied to your school's data no matter what, whether you just came in or whether you've been there forever. But it's not just about the overall data of your school, but though that is one thing. I've adopted a school. The school that I came into was very low performing when I took it over. And we are, like I said, we're making a climb, but it's like this. And the data is just now turning, and it's year 4. The data is just now turning. But what I noticed and what I looked at was my teachers are getting better. My retention rates are getting higher. Like I'm retaining more people. I'm having more people step into leadership. Those things, the growth of my students. Last year, 2 years ago, my students were in one of the lowest growth, bands. Now they're at moderate to high growth in certain areas. And so it's all about being able to look at what you're doing and evaluate how well you're doing it, and being bold enough and honest enough to make the changes and pivot when you have to, or and being humble enough to say, hey, I didn't get this right. We got to cut this right here and we got to turn. So that was one of the last must do's. If you are going to create conditions for healing, learning, thriving, invest in your teachers and the training that's going to make that happen. Be very mindful of your data. And if you can't do that, just create a small little plan for yourself to let your personal narrative, your personal and authentic leadership tell itself. And so I was going to ask people in the chat if they wanted to, but I would like to just I would like the people in the chat just to pick one of these things. You know, what did you learn today about leadership? Not so much my 3 eyes, but why having pillars would be important, or, you know, a starting point that you're going to commit to, because you just spent this whole time listening to these things. I really want every educator that's in here to start, just start. And so that's all I have. I want to thank all of you again for giving me this space to let me tell my leadership story, and to give you all some tips and ideas. And I am cheering for you all, whether I know you or not. Wherever you are, I am cheering for you, and that is definitely deep, true, and heartfelt. Like, keep doing it. Do the damn thing. Stay in the deep end. Do the hard work. It's worth it. It's worth it. Kids' lives, well, I'm gonna get emotional. Kids' lives will change because of it. My life changed because of it. So do it. That's all I got.
This was excellent. This was excellent. I so many things. Yes, Jeff, when she said, what do you want to be remembered for? It's very powerful. Once again, you know, what are your takeaways? Like she said, you just spent this whole time here listening and learning, and what are you going to commit to doing? And, you know, whatever you commit to doing, make sure it's something that you have control over, and you do have control over how you frame what you see, how you choose to give people grace and space and empathy, and what your why is, and how you're going to tap into that. So I loved it. Victoria says instructional leadership is key. SEL, academic, authentic relationships, and they do matter. Absolutely. So, you know, on behalf of the CSLA Center for Educational Improvement, Jeff, myself, Jesse, and Hannah in the background, I just want to say thank you all for coming out. This has been amazing. Anitra, keep doing the damn thing, because
thank you, girl. I will. And you guys keep doing this too. Get this message out there. There is power in passion.
Absolutely. There it is. Boom.
Boom. Mic drop.
Somebody tweet that.
Yeah.
And tag CSLA and Center for Educational Improvement. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Anitra.
Have a good one.
Have a good one. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you, Jesse. Go ahead.
So the second to the last slide, where you had all of the components of, you know, the things that you use and how you use them. Do you present that to your people at the very beginning of the year, so they understand what's expected of them, like setting those clear expectations, so that if and when you address any one of those, you can refer back to it?
I absolutely do that.
Can you put that slide back up?
Yeah. Hold on a sec. Let me get that for you.
Because I think clear expectations is the only way to really start something. Because then it's hard for people to say they didn't know, you know?
There it is.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. So I do. We
can't see it, Anitra. We can't see it. Switch again.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
My bad. Let me do it. Hold on. No, share screen. Why is I'm all done now? I'm like, whoo. I'm like,
you did great.
Mess.
You did great.
It was wonderful. I mean, I can't believe how impactful that was in such a short period of time. You were so precise. I love it.
Thank you so much.
If every educational leader could work from this.
Can you see it now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go down to it. Keep going.
It would be in a much better place in education. That one. So that, I mean, if everyone knows kind of what everyone's role is, what is expected, it's like a rubric really for how the school runs. It covers every facet of what happens throughout the building in the course of a day. And so it really does pinpoint. And I think the pillars are important because that's the only way you can really tailor whatever support or service or system or intervention a child needs. You can't just nobody can just get a blanket, this is what you need to do. That's how you really know your students and know how to address their very specific needs. Anyway, that's all I want
Everything
to
has
share.
to be personalized.
Yes.
It does.
All righty. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Have a great day. Thank you so much for staying back. I do appreciate it. Good luck
I
with
just wanted
everything.
clarification. Thank you.
Reach out if you need something. Okay, I will stop sharing.
Awesome job, Anitra. That